Hey, somebody needs to check the phone tap. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to the Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. This week, the Professional Noticer is sponsored by Books for Veterans. The Veterans Administration in Washington, D.C. has asked for 10,000 Andy Andrews books, and I'm personally donating as many as I can, but to reach 10,000, we need your help. What we're able to do to make that easier for you is for every $10 donation you make, a hardback book will be sent to the VA for veterans, for their families, and for the employees of VA. That $10 will cover the cost of the book, the shipping, the handling, everything. So whether you can make this a personal gift or a corporate donation, just go to andyandrews.com/veterans. This can be added to a website purchase or done as an individual entry. And on andyandrews.com, any t-shirt that you buy, we will add a book in your name to the pallet that goes to the VA. Thank you so much for your support. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on the Professional Noticer. And as you know, we love it when somebody comes to the table with both. When they have some observations and some answers, this is a particularly valuable person. And we have that situation today. We have coming in here with us from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, a New York Times bestselling author of 22 books. Now, we've had some authors on this show before, but I don't know that we have had anybody on that had like the hottest book in the nation at that moment. This guy has just released a book that debuted 2 weeks ago, debuted at number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. The book is Oath of Loyalty, and the author is Kyle Mills. He joins us now. Kyle, how are you doing?
I am doing well, thank you.
Man, thank you. Thank you for being with us today. And I've got to say, I am particularly excited for several reasons. I've been a fan of Vince Flynn for many years. You're in one of my favorite cities, Jackson Hole, and I just finished Oath of Loyalty. And first of all, his best friend? Seriously?
Yeah, you got to take risks when you write thriller novels, you know?
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, I love what you do. And, you know, the head of lettuce thing, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody in this book, but just pay real close attention when somebody buys a head of romaine lettuce, okay? Just that's all I'm going to say. You are a great storyteller, Kyle, and I guess to bring everybody up to speed, you have written personally 22 books, but that includes 8 Mitch Rapp novels. And so how did that happen? I mean, I know that Vince Flynn, who I'd met a couple of times, just briefly, I know that he passed away, and the family said, what happened? How did you get in this position of writing? It's like Ian Fleming passed away, and now somebody's writing James Bond novels. You know, I mean, you have really taken this thing, but how did that happen?
Yeah, it was kind of a surprise, to be honest with you. I remember my wife called me from work because she had been listening to the radio and said, oh my God, did you hear that Vince died? And I hadn't. But, I thought like a lot of people, as I was thinking about it, I thought, as a fan, I really didn't want the character to die. And if you'd read the last book he wrote, it kind of left him cliffhanging, and nothing. He didn't kill him, he didn't retire him, or anything like that. And I remember saying to her, I hope that they continue it, at least do one more book to close it out, and they hire somebody really good to do it. And I don't know, a few weeks later or something, I got a call asking me if I might want to do it. So kind of out of the blue.
And they hired somebody really good to do it.
I like to think so, but yeah, I'm a little biased. So yeah, it was something I had to think about, honestly. I didn't thought about myself, but kind of a daunting task, because Vince was a great writer. He'd written one of the most popular series in the world. And, he had fans that, really cared deeply about the character, and you didn't want to mess that up.
Well, I've got to say, as somebody who, I like this particular kind of book anyway. And I guess I've read the entire Mitch Rapp series. I'm sure my oldest son has. And knowing what happens, I mean, I guess it's not that somebody passes away, but somebody wants their son to take over the business of writing the novel, or somebody, wants to expand their universe and have somebody else write. In my experience, it that has signaled when I quit reading that author. It's just because it's not the same, and some of them are painful. But I have to say, you and one other guy, Mark Greaney.
Yeah, Mark, yeah.
You're probably buddies with him, but you and he did some Tom Clancy stuff, but you guys are the equal of your predecessor. I mean, I know that you're taking taking that story to new heights and taking that character to different places. But honestly, Vince has got to be thrilled. I know his family's got to be thrilled with the writing, because it's.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean it's an interesting, the choices you have to make are interesting, and how people do it. Everybody has different philosophies. Some people, they write more, they're in their own style, but use those characters and things like that. I really wanted to write almost exactly like Vince. I mean, the goal of the first book was that no one would be able to tell if he didn't write that book. And that was been my philosophy, because, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Vince died at the height of his popularity, at the height of his talent. And so I just wanted to very much carry that on. Now you have to change it, because the world changes. The world,
sure.
I mean, Vince only died, 10 years ago, not quite maybe. And,
right.
The world's a very different place than it was when he was writing. So in order to stay current and make the thrillers feel like, they're kind of ripped from the headlines, it's a little bit of a cliche, but it's important. You have to change the series and the characters a little bit to keep up, which I've tried to do, but minimal.
Well, I think you do an awesome job. You came to the thought process pretty honestly with the way you grew up. I was unaware that you had grown up right in the middle of such, national intelligence.
Yeah, I was lucky. My father was an FBI agent who later became the legal attaché to the United Kingdom and then the director of Interpol. So, I mean, that was my life from when I was a little kid. It was always FBI and operators and CIA and MI5 and MI6. Those are the people I knew that were friends of the family that came over to the house. So honestly, when I decided, I'm going to write a book, I wanted to write a novel. This was a long time. I was 29 years old. I started thinking, because I was a huge reader, but I read everything. I read all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And I said, what genre should I write in? And I'd always loved thrillers, Tom Clancy and Ludlum and all these guys. And But it honestly was a little bit of laziness because this was before the internet. And I thought, would it be really easy? Because if I want to know what the director of the CIA's office looks like, I've known him for years. I can just call.
Right.
So I thought I had an interesting idea for a book, and I knew all the people that would naturally be involved if it really happened. So I took off on that, and honestly never expected to write a second book. It was just sort of a project I did. And lo and behold, that was 22 books ago.
What's the name of that book?
The first book is called Rising Phoenix. And it's so old. When people bring it to be signed at book signings, the pages are starting to get yellow. It's kind of horrible.
That's awesome. And your dad was the lead investigator on the Pan Am 103 flight over Lockerbie, right?
Yeah, which is something I kind of share with Mitch Rapp. Mitch Rapp got into the CIA because his girlfriend was on that flight.
Right.
And he was getting ready, he had just graduated from college, was getting ready to graduate from college. And I was at my college graduation dinner in London where my father worked. And when that happened, and his assistant came in and it said that a plane had gone down, but they thought it would be mechanical. And then during the dinner, it became clear it wasn't. And we went off to Lockerbie I don't think I saw him for a few months after that.
Wow. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know I'm mixing legends here, but Tom Clancy had an FBI character named Dan Murray. Was that person based on your dad?
Yeah, he kept the same initials. My father's name's Daryl Mills. That was a really odd, my first brush with a writer. It's funny, my father knows more writers than I do. My parents did. But Tom had written Hunt for Red October, but I wasn't really aware of it. It was before, he still had the insurance agency. He was still working at his insurance agency.
You knew him when he was working at his insurance agency?
My dad called from the office. This is in London, and said, I don't know, there's some insurance salesman who I guess writes books, and he wanted to talk to me about what I do because I'm going to be a character. But he seems lonely. Can we have him to dinner? So we brought him home to dinner. And I was like, really, you write books? And I actually, after he left, bought his book and thought, wow, this guy's like the best thriller writer in the world. And my folks and he and his family remained really close friends until he died.
What a great story. What a great story.
Yeah, I don't know how that happens though. It's funny. I remember I called my parents, I don't know, it was a few years ago, and I said, what are you doing? And they said, oh, we got Frederick Forsyth staying at the house, and we're just drinking beers by the pool. And I thought, how come I don't know Frederick Forsyth?
Yeah. I mean, this could do you some good. Yeah.
Sure,
I mean, oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I think maybe you ask your parents if they would like to adopt.
Okay.
Good grief. That is awesome. I do have a couple of questions from viewers that knew that you were going to be on the show and who are very interested in writing. And so we have authors occasionally on the show, and I love to ask them writing questions because it seems to be a style of doing things as well as a style of writing. And so what is your process when you are in the middle of a novel and you wake up in the morning? At what time and what do you do? What's your day?
Well, I mean, one thing you have to remember definitely is that everybody has a different process. So, like mine is very different than Vince's. I tend to write really elaborate outlines and do all my research so I know exactly where the book is going. And they tend to be so detailed that I don't even necessarily write the book in order. I just pick a chapter that I'm interested in that day. And I write, once I'm done with the outline, I write a chapter a day. And till
Well,
it's done,
you've already answered the question, do I have to write my novel in order?
no,
So
but most people do.
keep
Yeah, I
going.
think,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
most people do, and you have to have a probably pretty decent outline if you're not going to. And yeah, and then after I finish that, I start on the second draft, do a second draft, and then that typically is what goes into my editor, and then comes back to me and make a few changes, and that's kind of my process. I'm a bit of a 9 to 5er.
I was going to ask you, are you an early writer or a late writer?
Late. I'm not an early riser, so and then I get and then I wander around and do stuff, and then
really that's a part of your process too. Me too.
Yeah, and it's sometimes it's just necessary. I mean, I was running up to do this interview because the guy is fixing my heater downstairs in the garage. So I was talking to him, and I'm like, oh no, that seems like my mornings are always. There's always something like that going on, and I can never.
Yeah, and if there isn't something going on, we can always find something to go on. I've never wanted to clean my desk as much as staring at a computer screen. So
exactly, and that's one of the other things that it helps to have an outline, so at least you know where you're going. Whereas like Vince just sat down and started writing, which I think I would find very intimidating.
That is the difference. That's the difference in a writer who has engineering tendencies and a writer who is ADD. Because I'm ADD. I can't make myself do an outline. I'm a seat of the pants kind of write the stories as they're coming into my head too.
And it's, that is a very common, even Tom Clancy, those huge, complicated books he did, he wasn't much of an outliner. So some people can pull that off. I'd go nuts. I tried it a little bit once, and it just made it worse on the back end. Then I produced a terrible novel that then had to be fixed, which was not an efficient way to do it.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this: what do you do? And I think I know the answer to this, but what is your process for discipline? What do you do on days that you don't feel like doing it?
I do it anyway. Because I have a deadline. So I know that if I mess around one day, that I have to work another day. So now I will say that I do mess with which day I work on, particularly in the winter when it's snowing. So if it snows a lot, then I go skiing. And if it does, and then I work on the weekend, or something. So, but yeah, I have a weekly schedule, and that's how many chapters have to get written no matter what. If I have to stay up till midnight, work 7 days a week. If I have to work 2 days, that's fine too, better. But yeah, I'd hate to miss a deadline.
I can't remember who said it, but I remember some author had 35 New York Times bestsellers or something, like one of these older guys, and his quote was, everybody has one book in them, but after that one book, it's a discipline. It's a discipline to imagine, a discipline to make yourself put those imaginations on paper. And I see that too.
Yeah, sure. And if you write an autobiographical, your first novel is kind of autobiographical, you might not have a second story to tell. And I ran into this like really, really hard. I had written that first book. I said, like I told you, I didn't really plan on writing another one. And my agent got an agent, and he signed me to a 2-book deal without asking. And I'd never thought about anything about writing a second book. And it was really the most stressful thing I'd ever done. And I actually asked Tom Clancy for advice, and he said, oh yeah, anybody can write one book, but two's hard. And I thought that was not helpful at all.
Yeah.
And it actually got so stressful because, when you're writing your second book, your first one, my first one was a national bestseller. And then it's not fun anymore, right? It's a job. You've got all these people who are spending money and they've been in the industry forever and they're calling you and they're telling you don't like this, don't like that. And I got so stressed out that I asked my wife if she mind if I quit and just go back to, I was working at a bank at the time. And she said, no, I really think you should because I think you're going to have a heart attack. You're only 29 years old. And so I did. I quit. I sent a fax to my agent and said, I haven't spent any of the money they paid me and I'm happy to give it back, but I don't want to do this anymore. And he called me first thing in the morning and said, no one will ever talk to you or call you or anything. Just write a book, write whatever book you want, and deliver it. And so I said, okay, I can write. I think I can work under those parameters. And that went on to become a New York Times bestseller. So I've worked that way ever since, interesting.
Yeah, man. And that's awesome. I mean, because when you prove that you can deliver, people will allow you to deliver. My first couple of books, I was just like, oh my gosh, the people, the editors were like, well, you can't do it this way, and you can't put that in caps, and you can't put italics on that, and you can't, you can't use an exclamation mark, and I'm like, good grief. But then when the books, the first book that hit the New York Times list, the books start selling. Now that's my style.
Sure. Yeah, a good editor can make you look smart.
Yeah, they're fine with it now. So it's very funny. It's curious that you would say that somebody's first book is autobiographical, because I have long held the opinion that if you want to get a comedian's best album, get his first album. And if you want his second best album, get his third album. But don't ever get a comedian's second album, because the way comedy is done, the way comedy is written, is, that first album it's taken 15 years to get the material in that first album. And because it's life, it's this guy's story in his sixth grade. It's her story on her first date, but it's that whole life. And then after that point, everybody's saying, oh my God, we got to have a second. We got to have a follow-up. Come on, right now. And so while it took 15 years to gather the material for the first album, the second album, it took 3 months. Yeah. And they show.
It's hard because, it's a really different thing to just make stuff up. I don't shoot people and I don't run around the world shooting people and all this stuff. So it's made up. And, that's very different than saying having an interesting life and kind of writing about it and embellishing it to do that. To just start with a blank page and try to figure out what's going to happen. So the difference between like writing nonfiction and fiction, nonfiction has its own challenge.
Let me just make a statement, and I would like your opinion on this. Fiction has to be more true than nonfiction.
In some ways, that is absolutely true. I have certainly Vince's fans are very much sticklers for accuracy and believability and all that. And I have to work really hard on that because people know that's not true. And truth be told, sometimes, the world is stranger than fiction. That's kind of a cliche too, but it exists for a reason. And if it's actually true, it's an incredible story. I think about just strange stuff like, it's hard for me to believe that, 50, 60 years ago, we flew to the moon, before we invented the calculator. Yeah. But what an incredible story, but you wouldn't believe it if somebody just wrote it as fiction.
And that's the thing, because you could read the bear opened his mouth and started to talk and you go, oh, that's nonfiction. I guess it did.
I guess it did.
If you put that in a fiction book, people go, well, that's stupid. That never happened. And so it does. It has to resonate. This one of the things that my son and I like about your writing, or I guess one of the things that we appreciate about your writing is the accuracy about the stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's, I mean, I remember reading a book, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and the guy, you know, had his Glock, and when the person walked into the room, he took the safety off his Glock. And of course, they're going, really? I mean, because Glocks don't have a safety, obviously, or somebody, he went into the duck blind with his rifle. It's like, you're not shooting ducks with a rifle, and
You
so
have to be a good shot.
yeah, and so the you write very plausible but very exciting, with crazy twists and turns that are not too much. They're not too much. They don't distract you. I think you just hit a perfect. You just hit perfect notes with what you do.
Well, I hope so. It's, those details are important because, you are writing a pretty fanciful story, right? I mean, it's not something that happens every day with the things that Mitch Rapp does. So it has to be grounded in reality. And if you mess up those facts, it pulls people out of the story, And honestly, I'll be honest with you, my first book, I messed up some facts because I never thought the book would get published. And so I'm not going to research, this and that, so carefully. And then they rammed it through. They're like, basically, we're going to print in 2 weeks. And I said, well, wait a minute. I haven't even done the last draft of that book. Too bad. And so I actually did make some mistakes in that book and got burned on it. So I've been very, very careful. It's impossible, though, to not ever make a mistake.
Right. Sure.
You shoot for that, but then there's stuff. I mean, I had an Arctic explorer. I'd written about the Arctic, and I had said the guy was on a dog sled, which seemed completely reasonable to me. And an Arctic explorer wrote me and said, "No, they banned dogs in the 70s." And I looked.
Oh, wow!
But you don't even know. You don't even think to look that up.
Yeah, I had a situation on a book that I wrote. It was the scene is in 1942, and I wrote this thing, and it made all the edits. It was going out, and then 8 years later, I'm listening to the Audible with my sons, who are now old enough to listen to it at that point, and I hear a mistake that was in the writing. It wasn't in the, but I did the narration of it, and I didn't catch it then. And what it was this young American war widow, this soldier, and he's very tired. He's wiped out. He's hungry. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. And so she makes him a pan of biscuits from scratch, and he eats the whole pan. Now, do you catch it?
No, that doesn't bother me. Right?
Well, I didn't catch that either. But the thing that I finally understood is that in 1942, you wouldn't say making biscuits from scratch because there wasn't any other way to make biscuits.
It's redundant. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know that I'd call that a mistake because you're writing for an audience, a modern audience. So You're describing that she didn't open a package. It's funny. I remember reading a Western. I can't remember which one it was, but he said something like the horse was running and throwing up a wake like a boat. And I remember thinking, I understand what you're saying, and it's for a modern audience, but it pulled me out of the story because there were no boats that threw up a big wake behind them, during 1880.
Right.
So you do have to be a little bit careful about this. I would say that I would call that a very minor mistake.
Thank you. So, what is next for you? What are you? 2 questions. What is next, and how can we help you?
Buy the books, and enjoy them, and tell people
we would definitely
enjoy them. Yeah, tell people about them. The next one is another Mitch Rapp thriller, so I'm about halfway done with it now, and it's due in April. So just the continuation of the saga.
Just don't kill off Irene. Don't just.
No.
You know, I thought that's where you were getting to in this book, and I was like, oh no, come on. So
No,
just
it's funny. A lot of people think that this is the last book in the series, and I get a lot of emails about that where people say, "Oh, so this is done now," and I'm like, "No." They're like, "But you left it kind of like it's done, but it's not done."
well, it's excellent, and it's on fire, you guys. It's been out for a week and a half, and it's got 4,000 reviews on Amazon already. And so get on this. It's Oath of Loyalty, and get it in hardback right now, and get it on Audible too, so you can hear the story and have that hardback as a collector's item. Kyle, what can we do to help you other than buy the books? We're going to put how to contact you on the with your social media on the show notes, and we really appreciate you being with us.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and yeah, absolutely. Contact me. Shoot me an email or get on Twitter or something. And I always love to hear what people think of the books and hear everybody's thoughts.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing what tiny bit of mental energy I have for you. Seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Glock 19s for the cast and crew, provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional funding provided by FantasticFuture.com. Did you grow up talking into your watch like Dick Tracy? Did you dream of the day you'd have a car like George Jetson? Well, friend, allow FantasticFuture.com to move you past your disappointing present. With our clever graphic designers and a bit of trick photography, we can show you the future. With an email to your inbox every day, FantasticFuture.com reveals the world in which you will live only 10 years from now. You'll see the cars you will drive and which planets can be round-tripped on one tank of fuel. Speaking of fuel, FantasticFuture.com reveals that in a mere 10 years, transportation fuel would be distilled from the kudzu vine. And because the kudzu vine replicates at about 7 miles per hour, the world will have a limitless supply. There's the FantasticFuture.com section on architecture, food, sport, and entertainment for your perusal. And in the entertainment section, you'll be informed about the movies of the future. Modern actors doing scenes with holograms of dead actors. See a mock-up of Dave Chappelle doing a scene from Rio Bravo with John Wayne. Join now. That's FantasticFuture.com. 10 years is just a guess.